Okay, guys, thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for those people who are staying. I recognise I'm standing between you and a glass of champagne at the round tables, but thanks for staying on. I think I'm mic'd up now. Perfect. Thank you. We've heard a lot today, and thank you very much for all of the speakers that we've seen before us. Particularly, I enjoyed some of the very glamorous stories we heard from, obviously, family offices, some of the beautiful designs. And we can see very much that the acquisition of a super yacht is very much begins its life as a project of the heart, but very quickly becomes a project of the head. And that's kind of where we start to think about where we fit in the landscape. And I want to just tell you a little story. It's a little bit about Charles the super yacht lawyer, let's call him. So I apologise if anybody in the room is called Charles. It's not actually about you. But Charles spoke to us not so long ago and said he had a really tricky experience where he felt like he'd lost $5 million of his clients' money. And he hadn't really lost it, but for him, it was only temporary. But for him and his firm, which was holding his clients' money, is that he'd sent it to the shipyard, but he had no idea when it was going to arrive, and he couldn't see it between the counterparties of any one of those people. And worse than that, because he didn't know when it was going to arrive, was the currency market was going mad at the time. So we had an owner who was potentially paying more for their boat than they actually wanted to. You had a shipyard who hadn't received any money, and a whole bunch of suppliers who were starting to feel a little bit anxious about how they were going to get paid. So one of the things that we looked at is that was delay in the system is actually one of the really critical parts of it. So as I say, we had a buyer who was unhappy about the price, everyone was unhappy about the lack of visibility and friction, but we knew that the money would arrive eventually, that we knew those contractors would get paid eventually, and we knew everybody would actually receive, and hopefully his or her of their more than expected yacht would take delivery, but it should have been easier. So one of the things that we as a business did and stepped back and said, there's got to be a better way when we think about the flow of funds that goes through every stakeholder that we've talked to today. Every legal company, every broker, every shipbuilder, every contractor, there is money flow in that system that ought to be seamless and simple and much easier than it is today. So in a couple of moments, I'm going to ask Sarah, who's our Chief Product Officer, to take us through it a little bit more. But really, we just felt that the flow of funds should be easier and the ability to manage foreign exchange should be much easier. Some of you in the room already know us. Just very quickly, we're an FCA regulated business. We're an EMI, as many others. Some of the mass market players like Revolut, Wise, PayPal. They're all EMIs, but we are very much in the business-to-business space. We only build for business, and for us, it's all about building for this business. We have offices in the UK, offices in Netherlands, and we've got an increasingly large team building out in Florida, where we recognise now we're starting to talk about the full life cycle of managing the finances of buying, operating, managing, refurbishing, and then ultimately selling a boat, is that obviously a large amount of activity, as we've seen today, actually happens in the US. So we've got an ever-increasing team now in the US. Now, our role, we're very clear about what our role is. We act in support of you. Everybody in this room is what we think of as the heroes in our story. We don't provide lending advice. We're not interested in offering investment services. That's what your experts are. What we're simply providing is the tools to connect the ecosystem so the players in the acquisition, management, and resell and refit of a boat can actually be all connected with each other. We've got 13 years of experience, so we feel like we know it well enough. One of the things that is key for us, and particularly for Sarah, is we like feedback. We like to understand in detail how the money flows between all of the different parties, so we can help make it easier and more seamless. So many of you know us anyway from some of the operational part of the business. You may not know that we do escrow services, that we can make stage payments under contract between different parties. And of course, as I say, simplicity, for us to make it simple and seamless and secure at speed is really important. One key part of what we do is something called Centtrip Now, which I have to say is, when I think about Stephanie, who's our head of marketing, is one of the things that she always tells us that we ought to shout more about, and we don't. Centtrip now is a function that sits on our platform where if you have multiple parties, all of which exist in the same environment, you can move money between parties fee-free and instantly. So that moment between the lawyer and the counterparty and if you like the shipyard and the contractor all could have moved instantly and fee-free if you'd have all existed in the same place. So we can do that really, really easily. That's the kind of fintechy part of what we do. But we also recognise the human part of it is really important. So if we want to step back and truly own that alternative banking for that super yacht life cycle, we need to be able to talk to it and have an expert customer services team that you can talk to at any one moment in time. And we've built that, as I say, over 13 years of experience, and we're particularly proud of that. And we recognise that people buy people, so the relationships that we have in the market are really what we value. Again, we want to be able to make things as easy as we can, but we also recognise that we can do it at scale. Just to give you a sense of the size of us, so we've been going since 2013. About $3 billion passes over our platform just in payments and transactions between the counterparties that sit on our platform. We support around 2,400 super yachts and over half of the world's largest charter yachts. So we're pretty big. We have other industries that we serve, and interestingly, when we talk about the life cycle of a high-value asset, which is what we specialise in, we also operate in markets that behave spookily similarly. When you think about an asset at sea, a ship on the ocean, is that a film on location or a band on tour bizarrely behaves in exactly the same way. And we've become experts in that in terms of, the raising money to make a movie, having people who are legally bound to manage the contractual obligations that sit around that lending. We can manage that environment. It heads into an operating environment. Obviously, a movie gets made, takes up to 3 to 5 years, script to screen. And then, of course, all of the income from that movie comes back in the same way that charter or resale would do. So we know how to manage the life cycle of a high-value asset. So that's how exactly we think about our super yacht. Entertainment is a key part of what we do, but also the heart of our business was when we created back in 2013 was definitely in the super yacht sector. So I'm going to hand over to Sarah. Sarah's going to talk a little bit more about our products, but we've got our round tables that we're going to sponsor afterwards, so a glass of champagne is coming your way, and we'll have to answer any questions that you may have. And I know one of the things that is particularly forward of mind, and something that we do really well, is the management of complex structures and complex jurisdictions. So that's something that we're very happy to talk about a little bit later on. So I will hand over to you, Sarah.
Thank you.
I'll get the comfy chair now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jane. Appreciate that. Now, my name's Sarah Gooding, and I have a cold, so at some point I think I'm going to start losing my voice. Hopefully we'll make it through this, but the benefit of that is that I might stop talking sooner and we get to the champagne faster. So a little bit about me and how I ended up running the product at Centtrip. I have been delivering proprietary SaaS platforms for over 30 years. 20 of those have been in the finance space. And what I think that makes me is something of a payments nerd. When I was listening to one of the it was Lawrence earlier on today, and he talked about this isn't work for him, this is passion. And weirdly enough, payments are my passion, which is very bizarre. But when we look at what that means in terms of reality, it's how do we make that process more seamless, more streamlined? And actually, we really want to make it boring, because you will have all been in a position at some point where something has gone materially wrong in the payment process. And what we have to do in order to make that boring and just straightforward is make it a seamless payment process. Jane's already touched on that, but it's absolutely essential. One of the things that we do is we work very, very closely with our counterparties in order for them to ensure and understand what it is that we are doing. We have a treasury team that works night and day doing that and relentlessly making sure that those flow of funds of any size will go through our platform as and when it is supposed to. Interestingly, I know Jane has touched on our film and TV work. What Richard put up earlier on this morning, just to go right back to this morning, the average size of a yacht transaction is 19.8 million, and that's fairly commensurate with the average size of the film budgets that we see as well. So there's a lot of comparisons there, weirdly so. But what they also need, and what everybody in this room needs, is reliable and predictable systems. As I've said, I've spent the last 30 years building proprietary software that means that we are able to build into our platform that reliability. And the final thing is that we need to look at and ensure there is robust financial governance. Now, I just want to go into that point a little bit more in terms of what does that mean, and to talk to you a little bit about what Centtrip is as a regulated EMI, an e-money institution. We're regulated by the FCA. I know this is the second time you'll have heard that on this stage today. But what that actually means is that we're regulated not exactly in the same way that banks are, but very, very similarly. We have to hold client funds in what are called safeguarded accounts. Those are trust-like relationships. And the significant difference between us and a bank is that when deposits are made with a bank, those can be invested, or they can have loans against them, or they can form the assets of the bank. With an EMI, that is absolutely not the case. Our funds that we hold on behalf of our clients are ring-fenced. They do not become the asset of the bank, and they are held completely separately from our operational funds. Another thing that we can do as a regulated entity is that we can provide escrow services. When I talk about escrow services, we can operate as a neutral escrow agent. We can provide the escrow account to brokers and to lawyers. But more importantly, for lawyers, we provide those third-party managed accounts. And what's so wonderful about a third-party managed account being provided by another regulated entity is that you, as the lawyer, do not have the auditing responsibility, which we take away that heavy lifting for you. But it's a very important point for you to consider. And then finally, when we look at the legal familiarity, we are neutral, we are regulated, and that means that should there be any disputes, it's handled by the courts in a familiar, well-trodden path. So now I just want to move on a little bit and talk to where we've seen some of the project challenges over time. And I know Jane touched on it earlier, the missing money. Money is sometimes missing, but it should pop up somewhere eventually, hopefully. But our job is to minimize that risk. And when we look at the challenges, you're often dealing with a high-value transaction, multiple parties, and a multi-jurisdiction environment as well. Now, I was asked the question earlier on today, what's your onboarding like? The best thing that we can ever do with the people that we work with is align our onboarding as quickly as possible, and then that minimizes the delays. The teams will understand how they can work together, and as soon as you do that, it becomes a much more turnkey, much more reliable, much more predictable process that you're going to go through. As Jane touched on with Centtrip now, we recommend that multiple parties are onboarded. If you've got a yacht that's sitting in the Med, that's the crew's all ready to go and needs to get going to the new owners, and the payment hasn't arrived, and nobody knows when it's going to arrive. When you have a scenario where all parties are onboarded and the legal ownership of those funds can transfer in an instant, then it allows the transaction to complete far more smoothly. As we all know in this industry, milestone payments, deposits are just part and parcel of the nature of the characteristics. And we specialize, as we've mentioned, in managing those large value transactions and holding them in regulated accounts. As I've touched on, and many of you will have experienced this in some way or another, working with brokers who are holding funds in accounts provided by banks, if they can get them, which is extremely difficult, and we know from some of the work that we've been doing with MEBA in terms of how they are extremely concerned that the banking facilities that they have currently are going to be switched off because of the only consistent in this financial world is that risk appetite will change. So we understand that complexity, we understand, and we specialize in this area for you. And as Jane has touched on, and actually I had a very interesting chat with Pavel, I think there he is over there, hi Pavel, a couple of weeks ago. Very interesting example, I hope you don't mind me using this, Pavel, where a yacht shipyard had basically underestimated the FX volatility on the milestone payments coming in. And I won't talk about the outcome just because it's probably sensitive, but it was a very serious outcome for the yacht owner. If you are not undertaking hedging strategies across and understand what those need to look like, whether it's 50% spot, whether it's 50% hedged, it needs to be part of the contract and the understanding of any long-term engagement that's being undertaken. Because if you don't do that, then you're just exposing yourself. And as Jane mentioned earlier, suddenly money can just disappear in transit, and you're subject to somebody else's FX rates as well. Finally, on the challenges, and we've heard it a lot today, people talk about transparency, and that is huge. I think everybody in this room is actually trying to work towards greater transparency. It's certainly something that we provide. We offer different role-based access to our platform. There's all manner of reports that can be downloaded, and you can have API access as well. So I think whichever system is going to be the source of truth, and we don't necessarily always need to be the source of truth, we talk to many other different systems, then that's a very important thing to consider as well. If we are all truly, truly trying to work towards transparency. So we did think, we did think about where we put the payment choreography here, about wearing a couple of tutus, but we sensibly decided against it. So I've touched on already how important it is to be working with regulated partners, and I've explained how Centtrip is well positioned in that, but uniquely positioned in that it understands the challenges and the behaviors of this particular market. In terms of the multi-party agreements, We are well versed in providing those and working with them in terms of providing escrow accounts, dealing with the different jurisdictional challenges, and also then providing third-party managed accounts. When we look at how we work across all the different activities in this particular market, we range massively from purchase through to refits, through to chartering, through to the yacht management, and so on and so forth. And we provide a series of mechanisms and features within our platform to be able to do that. Giving that level of control and visibility is absolutely imperative. There's all sorts of wonderful things in there. I mean, uploading a batch FX that's dealing in 10 different currency corridors is a thing of beauty. We also, within that, and in terms of baking into those milestone payments and the approvals, the right for different representatives to have access and provide that auditable trail of who has authorized a transaction and when. So we provide an awful lot of project features that allow the transactions to go as smoothly and as predictably as possible. And as I mentioned, we do that across the whole of the project sphere within the market. Thank you. Jane, I'll just hand back to you.
Just to wrap up, it's increasingly important for us to be able to map the landscape and understand the landscape, even though I think somebody this morning said they'd been in the business for 30 years and it didn't feel like, still felt like they were newbies. So our 13 years, we obviously are still newbies. But the point is we recognise and appreciate and have come to understand in detail the roles that each of the partners in the ecosystem take. How you connect with each other is something that will take change. It's an industry that's moving forward. Professionalising was something that was said quite a lot today. But I think the ability to be able to seamlessly move the money between you is going to become an increasingly important factor for how you can be, managing the project of the head, not just the project of the heart. So for us, thank you very much, guys. Happy to take questions from anybody a little bit later on. But yeah, let's do some project work with you guys. So thank you very much. Enjoy your champagne. Thank you.